The sky was never supposed to look like that. I remember the first time I saw it, blood red, pulsing with a light that didn't belong to this world. The air was thick, humming with a pressure that made my skin crawl. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The radios had died an hour ago, static hissing in my ear before falling silent. My phone was useless, the screen flickering with strange symbols before going black. I wasn't alone. I could hear the others, my fellow officers, moving through the darkness, their voices low and urgent, but the red light made everything look wrong. Shadows stretched and twisted, and every sound seemed to echo forever. If you're hearing this, remember the rules. That's what I keep telling myself over and over, like a prayer. The rules are the only thing standing between us and whatever is out there. I can't see it, not clearly, but I know it's hunting us. I've seen the tracks, too large, too deep, circling our vehicles, vanishing into the crimson haze. I've heard the voices, too, calling my name from somewhere just beyond the edge of the light. They sound like people I know, but I know better than to answer. That's rule number 4. Never answer when the night calls your name. I grip my badge, feeling the weight of it in my palm, and try to steady my breathing. The elders warned us about nights like this, but I never believed them. Not really. Now, with the sky burning overhead and the world turned inside out, I wish I'd listened more closely. If you're hearing this, if you ever see the sky turn red, don't panic. Don't run. Remember the rules. They're the only thing that might save you. And if you break them, you might not live to see the dawn. My name is Jonah Begay, and I've worn the badge of the tribal police for almost 8 years. I grew up on this land, in a small house tucked between the red mesas and the endless sky. My grandmother raised me after my parents were gone, teaching me the old ways, the stories, and the rules that kept our people safe long before there were police or radios or patrol cars. I left for a while, tried to make a life in the city, but the desert called me back. There's something about this place, the way the wind sings through the canyons, the way the stars burn so bright you feel like you could reach up and touch them. It's beautiful, but it's never been safe. The reservation stretches for miles, a patchwork of ancient land and scattered homes, dirt roads winding through sage and juniper. Out here, help is always far away. Sometimes it's just you, your partner, and the rules. We have rules for a reason. They're not written in any official manual, but every officer knows them. Some are simple. Don't patrol alone after dark. Never whistle at night. Others are strangers. If you see an animal acting too human, don't make eye contact. If you hear your name called from the desert, don't answer. My grandmother called them survival instructions. My sergeant calls them protocols. I used to call them superstitions until the night the sky turned red. I remember my first day on the job, standing in the briefing room as Sergeant Yazzie handed me a laminated card. 7 rules, typed in English and Navajo, each one sounding more like a warning than a guideline. "You'll want to keep this close," he said, his eyes serious. "These rules have saved more lives than you'll ever know." I laughed it off, but he didn't. "We have rules for a reason, Begay. Out here, the old dangers never really left. They just learned to hide." Now, as I look back on that night, I realize how much I took for granted. The land remembers. The rules are there because something is always waiting for you to forget. And when you do, it's already too late. Started small, the way these things always do. The week before the sky turned red, my days were filled with the usual calls. Domestic disputes, a stolen truck, a missing dog. Routine work, the kind that makes you think you know what to expect from the world. But then the calls started to change. First, it was the animals. Mrs. Chi called about her sheep refusing to leave the pen, huddled together and bleating at nothing. A rancher up near the canyon reported his horses spooked, eyes rolling, refusing to go near the north fence. Even the stray dogs that roamed the trading post parking lot vanished, as if they'd sensed something coming before any of us did. At first, I chalked it up to the weather. The air was heavy, thick with the promise of rain that never came. The wind carried a strange scent, sharp and metallic, and the birds fell silent at dusk. I mentioned it to my partner, Officer Yazzie, as we drove the back roads one evening. He just nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The animals know before we do," he said quietly. "Always have." The elders noticed, too. I saw them gathered outside the chapter house, faces drawn, voices low. My grandmother called me that night, her voice trembling. "Don't stay out late, Jonah. There's something wrong in the air. The old ones are restless." I tried to reassure her, but she just repeated the same warning she'd given me since I was a child. "Remember the rules. Don't forget." Still, I tried to keep my mind on the job. There was a break-in at the school, a fight at the gas station, a lost tourist who needed directions back to the highway. Normal problems, normal solutions. But every time I looked up, the sky seemed a little different. The sunsets bled deeper, the clouds hung lower, and at night, a faint red glow lingered on the horizon long after the sun was gone. One evening, as I finished my shift, I noticed a group of crows circling above the police station, their calls harsh and frantic. They landed on the roof, watching us with black, unblinking eyes. Yazzie saw them too. "Bad sign," he muttered, crossing himself in the old way. "They only gather like that when something's coming." That night, the dreams started. I saw the desert burning, the sky bleeding, shadows moving just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I woke up with my heart pounding, the taste of copper in my mouth. I told myself it was just stress, just the job getting to me. But deep down, I knew better. The land was warning us the way it always had. The rules weren't just for tradition, they were for survival. And as the omens grew stronger, I felt the old dread settle in my bones, colder and heavier with each passing day. The night after the crows came, Sergeant Yazzie called a meeting in the station's back room. The air was thick with tension, every officer on edge. He stood at the front, holding the laminated card I'd been given on my first day. "We need to go over the protocols," he said, voice low but firm. "Not just for the rookies, for all of us. The land's restless, and the signs are here." He started with the first rule: never patrol alone after dark. Back in '92, Officer Benali thought he could handle a call by himself. He never came back. We found his cruiser the next morning, doors open, engine running, but no sign of him. The only thing left was a set of footprints, his and something else, bigger, deeper, leading off into the desert. Never whistle at night. Yazzie's eyes flicked to the window, as if expecting to hear something. My uncle broke that one when he was a boy. He thought it was just a story to keep kids quiet. That night, something came to his window, tapping on the glass, calling his name in a voice that sounded almost human. He never whistled again. If you see an animal acting too human, don't make eye contact. A few years back, a deputy saw a coyote standing on two legs, watching him from the edge of the road. He stared too long. The next day, he was gone. All we found were his boots, neatly placed by the station door. If you hear your name called from the desert, don't answer. Yazzy's voice dropped to a whisper. That's how they get you. They use the voices of people you trust. Your mother, your brother, your best friend. But it's never really them. If you answer, you're theirs. He paused, letting the silence settle. These aren't just stories. Every rule has a reason. Every one was written in blood. You break one, and you might not see the sunrise. He handed the card to me, his hand steady but his eyes haunted. Keep this close, Bagay. The rules are the only thing standing between us and what's out there. When the land is restless, when the sky changes, you follow them. No exceptions. I looked down at the card, the words suddenly heavier, each one a lifeline. The room was silent, every officer lost in their own memories, their own fears. Yazzie finished with a final warning. If you ever doubt, remember the ones who didn't. Their names aren't on the wall because they were careless. They're gone because they forgot the rules. Don't let that be you. It was Officer Martinez's first week on the job. He transferred in from Albuquerque, all city confidence and easy smiles, not yet weighed down by the stories that haunted the rest of us. That night, we were assigned to patrol together, checking on a string of abandoned vehicles reported near the old trading post. The air was thick, the sky still holding that strange, bruised color even after sunset. We drove in silence for a while. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under our tires. Martinez tried to lighten the mood, whistling a tune under his breath as he scanned the roadside. I shot him a look, but he just grinned. Superstitions, right? My abuela had 1,000,000 of them. Never thought I'd see cops take them so seriously. I wanted to warn him, but the words caught in my throat. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it really was just an old story. But the unease in my gut wouldn't go away. We stopped at the first abandoned car, headlights cutting through the darkness. The vehicle was empty, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. Martinez stepped out, still whistling, and circled the car. I followed, flashlight in hand, scanning the shadows. That's when I noticed it, the sudden, unnatural silence. No wind, no insects, not even the distant bark of a dog. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Martinez's tune faltered, and he glanced around, suddenly uneasy. You feel that? He whispered. Before I could answer, a faint tapping echoed from the darkness beyond the car. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate like knuckles on glass. Martinez froze, his bravado slipping. Probably just a branch, he muttered, but his voice shook. We finished the check and hurried back to the cruiser. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror, something moving at the edge of the headlights, too tall, too thin, gone before I could focus. Martinez didn't say another word the rest of the shift. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the silence, the tapping, the way the shadows seemed to press in around us. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that the rules were just old fears clinging to new uniforms. But deep down, I knew better. The land had noticed. The first rule had been broken, and something had started to move. Martinez never whistled again, but the damage was done. The line between story and reality had begun to blur, and my own skepticism was starting to crack. The change came suddenly, as if someone had thrown a switch. One moment, the sky was its usual deep indigo, the stars just beginning to pierce the dusk. The next, it was ablaze, an impossible, seething red that bled across the horizon and painted every surface in a sickly glow. I stood outside the station, staring up, heart pounding. The air felt electric, charged with a tension that made my skin prickle. All around me, the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the radios crackled, then died. Static, then silent. I tried my phone, but it was useless, no signal, just a black screen. The other officers gathered in the briefing room, faces pale, eyes wide. Sergeant Yazzi's voice was tight. No communication, no backup. We stick together. We follow the protocols. But fear has a way of making people question even the oldest wisdom. Martinez paced, agitated. We can't just sit here. What if someone needs help? What if this is some kind of attack? His words echoed the anxiety I felt gnawing at my own resolve. The community was already on edge. Calls had come in earlier, children refusing to sleep, elders lighting fires and chanting prayers, dogs howling at nothing. The old women gathered at the chapter house, burning sage and murmuring in Navajo, their voices rising in a desperate chorus. I looked at Yazzie, searching for certainty. He met my gaze, steady but haunted. We have rules for a reason. Nights like this, you don't improvise. You don't try to be a hero. You remember what happened to Benali, to the others. We stay together. We wait for dawn. But Martinez shook his head. That's not good enough. People are scared. We're supposed to protect them. He moved toward the door, but Yazzie blocked his path. You go out there alone, you're on your own. The land's awake tonight. It's watching. The tension in the room was thick, every officer caught between duty and dread. I felt it too, the urge to act, to do something, anything, to fight back against the helplessness. But the memory of the rules, the stories, the warnings held me in place. Outside, the red sky pulsed, casting long, twisted shadows across the ground. The night had begun, and with it, the test of everything we believed. Would we trust the old ways, or would fear drive us to break them? The answer, I knew, would decide who survived until morning. The red sky pressed down on us, heavy and unnatural, as if the world itself was bleeding. The station's windows glowed with that eerie light, and every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own. We huddled together, the rules echoing in our minds, but fear gnawed at the edges of our resolve. Outside, the land was silent, too silent. Even the wind had died, leaving only the sound of our own breathing and the distant, rhythmic thump of my heart. It started with the voices. At first, they were faint, almost like the wind whispering through the sage. Then they grew louder, clearer, calling our names from the darkness beyond the parking lot. Jonah. The voice was my grandmother's, soft and pleading, just as I remembered from childhood. Come outside, Jonah. I need you. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to answer. Rule 4. If you hear your name called from the desert, don't answer. It's never really them. Martinez wasn't so sure. He stood by the door, eyes wide, listening. "Did you hear that? That's my sister. She's out there. She sounds scared." Yazzie grabbed his arm, voice sharp. "Don't listen. That's how they get you. Stay inside." But the voices kept coming, shifting and changing, always familiar, always just out of sight. They called each of us, promising comfort, forgiveness, love, promising things we wanted to believe. Then came the shapes. At first, they were just flickers at the edge of the red-lit yard, tall, thin figures moving with impossible speed, slipping between the patrol cars and the shadows. I caught glimpses of them, eyes that glowed like embers, limbs that bent the wrong way, mouths too wide and full of teeth. They circled the station, never coming too close, but never leaving. The air grew colder, the pressure building until it felt like the walls themselves might crack. We tried the radios again, desperate for any sign of help, but all we got was static. Martinez paced, muttering prayers under his breath. Officer Little Man, the oldest among us, sat in the corner, clutching his medicine pouch and chanting softly in Navajo. Yazzie kept watch at the window, shotgun across his knees, eyes never leaving the darkness. Suddenly, a loud bang shattered the silence. Something slammed against the back door, hard enough to rattle the frame. We jumped, weapons drawn, hearts racing. Another bang, then another, as if something was testing the strength of the building, searching for a weakness. The voices outside grew louder, more insistent, overlapping in a cacophony of pleading and threats. "Let us in. We're cold. We're hungry. We just want to talk." I remembered the rules, clinging to them like a lifeline. Don't patrol alone. Don't whistle. Don't answer the voices. Don't look at the things that move like people but aren't. Each rule was a barrier, a thin line between us and whatever hunted in the red-lit night. But fear is a powerful thing. Martinez edged closer to the door, drawn by the sound of his sister's voice. "She needs me," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "I can't just leave her out there." Yazzie blocked him again, voice trembling but firm. "That's not your sister. That's something wearing her voice. You open that door and you're gone." The banging stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then, from the window, I saw them, 3 figures standing at the edge of the light, watching us. Their faces were wrong, stretched and twisted, eyes burning with hunger. They didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. I felt their gaze like a weight on my chest, pressing the air from my lungs. Littleman's chanting grew louder, filling the room with the old words, the ones meant to keep evil at bay. I joined in, my voice shaky but growing stronger with each verse. The others followed, the sound rising in defiance against the darkness. Outside, the figures shifted, uneasy, as if the words stung them. The night dragged on, each minute an eternity. The rules were all we had, our only defense against the things that hunted in the red sky. We clung to them, repeating them like a mantra, refusing to break, refusing to give in to fear. And as the hours passed, I realized the truth. Survival wasn't just about strength or courage. It was about remembering who we were, where we came from, and the wisdom passed down through generations. The rules were more than superstition. They were the only thing keeping us alive. It was just past 3 in the morning when the tension finally snapped. We'd been holding on by a thread, clinging to the rules, our voices hoarse from chanting, our nerves frayed by every scrape and whisper from outside. The red sky showed no sign of fading. The figures at the edge of the light had multiplied, their shapes shifting and merging, always watching, always waiting. The air inside the station was thick with fear and sweat, every breath a struggle. Martinez was the first to break. He'd been pacing for hours, eyes darting to the door every time his sister's voice called out from the darkness. The voices had grown more desperate, more convincing, weaving in memories only he could know. "Jonah, please," he whispered, voice cracking. "What if it really is her? What if we're just letting her die out there?" Yazzie tried to stop him, grabbing his arm, but Martinez shook him off. "I can't do this. I can't just sit here while she's out there." He fumbled with the lock, hands shaking. "I'm sorry. I have to try." Before any of us could react, he yanked the door open and stepped into the red-lit night. The effect was immediate. The temperature in the room dropped, a cold so sharp it felt like knives against my skin. The chanting faltered as we rushed to the window, watching in horror as Martinez stumbled into the yard, calling his sister's name. The figures moved fast, too fast, closing in on him from all sides. He turned, saw them, and screamed. The sound was cut short, swallowed by the night. For a moment, we saw him reach out, as if begging for help. Then he was gone. The figures melted back into the shadows, leaving only silence and the open door. Panic erupted inside. Officer Littleman began to sob, rocking back and forth, clutching his medicine pouch. Yazzie slammed the door shut, bolting it, but the damage was done. The rules had been broken and the things outside knew it. The banging returned, louder and more violent, shaking the walls. The voices grew shrill, overlapping in a chorus of accusation and hunger. "You let him go. You broke the rules. Now it's your turn." I felt the fear rising, threatening to drown me, but something inside snapped into focus. I remembered my grandmother's words, the weight of the badge, the responsibility I carried, not just as a cop, but as a protector of my people. I forced myself to stand tall, to meet Yazzie's terrified gaze. "We can't fall apart. That's what they want. The rules are all we have left. We stick together. We keep chanting. We don't answer. We don't look. We wait for dawn." It wasn't easy. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to give in to the terror clawing at my mind. But I pushed through, rallying the others, leading the chant, repeating the rules until they became a shield against the chaos. Littleman's voice steadied. Yazzie's grip on his shotgun tightened, and together, we formed a fragile line of defense. Outside, the storm of voices and banging reached a fever pitch, but we held on. I could feel the presence pressing against the walls, testing our resolve, searching for another weakness. But we gave it nothing. No answers, no eye contact, no fear it could feed on. Just the old words, the old rules, and the stubborn will to survive. As the hours crawled by, the attacks slowed, the voices faded, and the red sky began to pale at the edges. We had lost one of our own, and the guilt would haunt me, but we had survived the breaking point. The rules had been tested, and though we'd faltered, we'd found our strength again. At that moment, I understood The rules weren't just about keeping monsters out. They were about keeping us together, reminding us who we were and what we stood for, even when the night was at its darkest. Dawn was still hours away, but the red sky had begun to thin, streaks of purple and black bleeding through the unnatural glow. The pounding on the walls had faded, replaced by a low, guttural chanting from outside, a sound that vibrated in my bones and made my teeth ache. I could feel the entity's presence pressing in, hungry and impatient, waiting for us to make another mistake. We were battered, exhausted, and one man down, but I knew we couldn't just wait for morning. If we did nothing, the thing outside would find a way in, or worse, it would never leave. I remembered the stories my grandmother told me. The old ceremonies meant to keep the boundaries between worlds strong. I also remembered my training, how to keep a team calm, how to read a threat, how to improvise when the plan fell apart. I realized then that survival would take both, the wisdom of the old ways and the discipline of the badge. I gathered Yazzie and Little Man, explaining my plan in a low voice. We're going to perform a protection ritual. Not just the words, but the intent. We'll use what we have, sage, salt, anything sacred. But we'll also set up a perimeter just like a crime scene. We'll watch each other's backs. No one acts alone. Little Man nodded, his eyes clearing as he clutched his medicine pouch. Yazzie loaded his shotgun, jaw set. Tell us what to do, Jonah. We moved quickly, gathering what we could. Little Man sprinkled corn pollen in a circle around the main room, chanting in Navajo, his voice growing stronger with each verse. I found a bundle of sage in the evidence locker, confiscated from a traffic stop, but sacred all the same. I lit it, letting the smoke curl through the air, and began to recite the old prayers my grandmother had taught me, words I hadn't spoken in years. Yazzie stood guard at the door, eyes scanning the windows, shotgun ready. As we worked, the entity's chanting grew louder, more insistent. Shadows pressed against the glass, faces forming and dissolving in the red light. The rules echoed in my mind. Don't answer the voices. Don't look at the things that move like people but aren't. But I also knew that sometimes, to protect your people, you had to face the darkness head-on. I took a deep breath and stepped to the center of the room, raising my voice above the noise. You're not welcome here. This is our land, our home. You have no power unless we give it to you. The chanting outside faltered, replaced by a guttural growl. The shadows pressed closer, swirling around the building. Little Man joined me, his voice steady. We honor the old ways. We honor the boundaries. You cannot cross unless we invite you. He threw a handful of corn pollen at the window, and the shadows recoiled, hissing. Yazzie fired a warning shot through the open window, the sound echoing across the yard. You want us? Come and get us. But you'll have to face all of us together. The entity responded with a scream, a sound that rattled the glass and made my vision blur. The door shook, hinges straining, as something massive slammed against it. I felt the rules straining, the old protections bending under the weight of the attack. I realized then that we couldn't just follow the rules, we had to adapt them, make them our own. I remembered another story, one my grandmother told me about a medicine man who faced a similar threat. He bent the rules, using a piece of his own hair in the ritual, offering a part of himself to strengthen the boundary. I pulled a strand of hair from my head, tying it around the sage bundle, and placed it at the center of the room. This is my offering, my promise to protect this land and these people. The air shimmered, the red light flickering. The entity screamed again, but this time it sounded weaker, less certain. The chanting outside faltered, replaced by the sound of retreating footsteps. Yazzie and Little Man joined me in the center, each adding something personal to the ritual: a badge, a feather, a scrap of uniform. Together, we chanted, our voices rising in defiance. The room is filled with light, not red but golden, warm and strong. The shadows at the windows shrank, then vanished. The door stopped shaking. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by our ragged breathing. The red sky outside began to fade, the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon. We had survived, not by following the rules blindly, but by understanding their purpose, by blending tradition with courage, and by standing together. The entity was gone, banished by the strength of our will and the power of the old ways. But I knew it would not be the last time we faced such darkness. The rules would always be tested, and it would always be up to us to decide how to meet the night. As the sun rose, I looked at my friends, my brothers, and felt a fierce pride. We had bent, but we had not broken. The land was safe for now, and the rules had saved us because we remembered why they existed in the first place. When the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon, the red sky finally faded, dissolving into the soft blue of morning. The world looked washed out, as if the night's horrors had drained all the color from the land. We stood in the quiet, exhausted and hollow, watching the sun rise over the mesas. The silence was different now, no longer heavy with threat, but aching with loss. Martinez was gone. His absence hung in the air, a wound we couldn't ignore. Yazzie sat on the steps outside the station, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent grief. Little Man walked the perimeter, scattering the last of his corn pollen, whispering prayers for the dead and the living. I felt the weight of every decision, every moment of doubt, pressing down on me. We had survived, but not all of us. The rules had saved most, but not everyone. Word spread quickly through the community. Families gathered at the chapter house, sharing stories of what they'd seen. The red sky, the voices, the shadows moving through the night. Some wept for Martinez, others for the old wounds the night had reopened. The elders spoke quietly, reminding us that the land remembers, that every choice leaves a mark. I visited Martinez's family, struggling to find words that could make sense of what had happened. His mother listened in silence, then pressed a small medicine pouch into my hand. For protection, she said. For the next time. I promised her there would be no more broken rules, but I knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. As the day wore on, the world slowly returned to normal. The animals came out of hiding, the children played in the dust, and the sky was just sky again. But something had changed in all of us. We carried the memory of the red night, the knowledge that the rules were not just tradition, but a shield against the darkness. We had paid a price, and the land would be remembered. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying every moment of that night, searching for meaning in the chaos. The rules had always been there, passed down from elders, written on cards, whispered in stories. I'd followed them out of habit, out of respect, but now I understood their true weight. They weren't just old warnings. They were the hard-earned wisdom of generations who had survived nights like the one we just endured. I thought about Martinez, about the moment fear overcame him and the cost we all paid. The rules had saved us, but they weren't perfect. The world was changing, and so were the threats we faced. I realized that survival meant more than just obedience. It meant understanding, adapting, and sometimes making new rules when the old ones weren't enough. At the next briefing, I stood before my fellow officers, the card of protocols in my hand. My voice was steady, but my heart ached. We all know the rules. We know why they matter. But last night showed us something new. The darkness changes. It learns. So must we. I took a pen and wrote a new line at the bottom of the card. If the sky turns red, gather together. Do not face the night alone. The others nodded, the weight of the night still fresh in their eyes. Yazzie placed his hand on my shoulder, a silent promise that we would remember, that we would not let fear divide us again. Little Man murmured a blessing, sealing the new rule with the old words. I left the station that day with a new sense of purpose. The land would always hold its secrets, and the night would always test us. But as long as we remembered the rules, old and new, and stood together, we had a chance. The red sky was gone, but its lesson remained. Survival is not just about following the past, but about facing the future, ready for whatever darkness comes next. The sky hasn't turned red since that night. Most days, the sun rises clean and gold over the mesas, and the world feels ordinary again. The children laugh, the elders tell stories, and the land breathes easy. But every so often, when the wind shifts or the clouds gather strange and low, I catch myself watching the horizon, waiting for a color that doesn't belong. People ask if the stories are true, if the rules really matter, or if we just cling to old fears because it's easier than facing the unknown. I tell them what I know. The rules are there for a reason. They're not just for the old ones or the superstitious or the weak. They're for anyone who wants to see another sunrise. They're for anyone who's ever felt the night press in and wondered what waits just beyond the edge of the light. If you ever find yourself on this land and the sky begins to bleed, remember what I told you. Don't run. Don't answer the voices. Don't break the circle. Gather together and hold fast to the rules, even when fear claws at your mind. Because the darkness is patient and it remembers every mistake. The red sky hasn't come back, but the land remembers, and so do I. And if you ever see the sky change, if you ever feel the world shift and the old dreads settle in your bones, remember, the rules are your only shield. Break them and you might not live to tell the story.